Japan has contributed more awesomeness to the world of video games than perhaps any other country on the globe. A short list of Japanese video game companies reads like a laundry list of the most influential developers in history. You know, little companies like Konami, Namco, Capcom, Sega, and Nintendo, just to name a few, set standards for design, gameplay, and marketing that shaped the video game industry throughout the 80s and 90s. Japan, however, is a country with famously weird sensibilities, which helps to explain why the most influential game of all time is about a plumber fighting turtles in a magical mushroom kingdom. Many of the games we'll be talking about today saw limited or no release in the Western world. So today, we're going over 9 of the craziest Japanese video games. Mr. Mosquito. Known as Ka in Japan, Mr. Mosquito was a PlayStation 2 release that puts the player in a third-person control of the title character, a mosquito, living in the home of the Yamada family. Your task, of course, is to suck the blood of various family members, using target areas of their bodies that are only available for a brief time. You must try to avoid flying within anyone's field of vision. You must also avoid sucking blood out of sync with your victim's heartbeat. Either of these will cause the victim's stress meter to rise, which may trigger a sort of boss battle in which you have to hit calming points of your victims to calm them down and make them forget about you. While the game sold poorly in the United States, perhaps due to the creepy English narration and the bizarre theme,
I hope that you do well. Good luck.
It moved over 40,000 units to Japan and was the 5th best-selling game that year. This was enough to merit a sequel called Ka 2 Let's Go Hawaii, in which the family goes to visit some American friends, and the player can choose between the original mosquito or his new American buddy. Strangely, this American-themed sequel did not get a release in the US. Not so strangely, nobody in the US cared.
Muscle March. The 2009 Nintendo re-release Muscle March is not so much a video game as is a seemingly endless series of ridiculous sight gags. The game's premise is pretty simple. Players can select from among several playable bodybuilder characters featuring several nationalities, and a polar bear of course. Thieves keep stealing your protein powder from the gym and you must chase them through the city as they smash through different obstacles. When they do, it leaves impact silhouettes in different poses that the player must imitate to squeeze through, much like the famous and equally weird Japanese game show, Hole in the Wall. Everything about the game, from its garish menu screen to its zany character design to its soundtrack, a bunch of pop songs about muscles, is designed to provoke chuckles from its players. The levels are short and the gameplay is simple, but the gameplay isn't the most important element here, that's the comedy. And the fact that completing the game rewards you with a dance party featuring your character and all the thieves you chase down is pretty funny.
Japan World Cup. In 2011, a browser game was released in Japan that seemed simple enough at first glance. Called Japan World Cup, it allowed players to bet on the outcome of computer-generated horse races. No controls were involved, participants simply placed their bets, sat back, and watched the insanity unfold. That's because these particular horse races were rather unpredictable, to put it one way, and completely clown shit insane, to put it another way. Jockeys could be seen riding anything from Trojan horses to Abominable Snowman, alongside regular horses, who might be sprinting along on 2 feet, sashaying down the track like a vaudeville performer, or suddenly stretching to become 30 feet long. Jockeys might find their horses to suddenly transform into weird vehicles or other animals like giraffes and seals. Needless to say, all of this made for very entertaining action, and several selected races were compiled into a DVD series in 2012, one of which, Japan World Cup 3, is available for purchase on Amazon. You're welcome.
Hadafo Boyfriend. Hadafo Boyfriend is a visual novel released for Windows and OS X in 2011. Like all visual novels, it features a branching storyline that allows the player to make choices at key points, which affect the story's outcome. This particular story focuses on a teenage girl attending her 2nd year of high school and has a dating simulation component in which the player protagonist can choose among several different male suitors. So far, not so weird, except that our hero is the only human character in the entire school. Hadafo Boyfriend takes place in a dystopian future in which bird flu has wiped out most of humanity, and intelligent birds have risen to become the dominant species. This makes our teenage hero a human misfit in a world of talking anthropomorphic birds, and I'd now like to remind you about the dating simulator. But it gets yet stranger. The game features a hidden alternative story mode called Bad Boys Love, which opens with the discovery of the main character's dead body and follows her best friend as she attempts to solve the murder. Despite its strange and frankly uncomfortable premise, the game sold reasonably well and was praised for a surprisingly rich writing story. A high-definition remake was released for most major platforms including PlayStation 4 and iOS in 2014.
Seaman. Here we have the single most bizarre entry in the pet raising game craze of the late 1990s, and its name is Seaman. By this point, you may find it easy to believe that the obvious sexual pun implied by its title is by far the least weird-ass thing about this game. Hello. Released for the Sega Dreamcast, Seaman gives the player some tiny fish egg-looking things in a tank to take care of by feeding them and regulating the water temperature. This is rewarded when the eggs hatch into small fish with utterly terrifying human faces that immediately begin cooing like babies. If the player can keep from reflexively putting the nearest heavy object through their TV screen at this point, these abominations will continue through several phases of growth, eventually ending up as mutant man frogs. But that's not all. The game is one of the few to take advantage of the Dreamcast's microphone, enabling the player to have conversations with their seaman, who sound like stuffy English professors and converse mostly in insults. The game sold an unbelievable 400,000 copies in Japan. 4 years later, when it was ported to the PlayStation 2, that version sold 300,000 more. While most critics praised the game for its innovative interactivity, the US version, which believe it or not was narrated by Leonard Nimoy, didn't quite catch on.
Eastern Mind: The Lost Souls of Tong Nu. Eastern Mind was a point-and-click game developed for the original Apple Macintosh in 1994 by the Japanese avant-garde artist Osamu Sato. To say that its premise is rather unusual would be like saying that the Pope is a little bit Catholic. So let's start from the beginning. Our hero Rin awakens to discover that his soul is missing. He finds out that it has been stolen by an island, the mystical island of Tong Nu, to which he must travel to get it back. Then he discovers that the island is an enormous green, disembodied floating head, that of the game's creator, Osamu Sato himself. And then it gets really weird. Through artistically rendered, creepy and surreal backdrops, the player must explore the head's interior and solve puzzles in which all logic and common sense cease to apply. Repeatedly dying is part of the game's mechanic, revealing an underlying Buddhist philosophy in which death is part of a never-ending cycle of life, and indeed is necessary in order to complete the game. The trippy design extends to the game's non-player characters, which mostly appear as absurd mashups of different animals, and the game offers no clues as to what you should be doing, leaving the player to attempt to extract meaning from the meaningless. It's an ambitious game, and it should come as to no surprise that it was produced by the same studio responsible for our next entry. LSD Dream Emulator. In 1998, artist Hiroku Nishikawa published his dream journal titled Lovely Sweet Dream, which he had been keeping for nearly 10 years. Released in conjunction with the book was an album of original music, and this game, LSD Dream Emulator, which was based on Nishikawa's journal. Despite LSD being an anagram for the book's title, it's easy to see why most assume that it refers to something else. Rendered in first-person 3D, the game simply requires players to navigate its dream world, a randomly generated, constantly shifting landscape. Features may change subtly, appear or disappear without warning, or the player may suddenly find themselves somewhere else with no explanation. Some areas appear relatively normal, while others resemble 2D video games viewed in 3D perspective, or strange, alien landscapes with no rhyme or reason. All manner of creatures can be found, from horses to disembodied human faces with legs, and also sinister shadow men and demons that can affect the player's ability to recall the dream, in flashback mode, which can only be accessed after playing the game for 20 days. The game was produced and co-designed by Osamu Sato and has developed a sizable cult following due to its singularly weird nature and its impressive adeptness at capturing the feel of an actual dream.
Rapeplay. The title of this game is its own trigger warning. Released for Windows in 2006, Rapeplay is a first-person 3D game in which the player commits crimes, which is all that we can say without getting into some really disgusting and perverted territory. If the title was not enough, please be advised, you have been warned. The objective of this game is to systematically stalk, publicly fondle, and eventually rape a mother and her 2 daughters. The game has a realistic sex simulator that is controlled by movements of the mouse, and the objective of the game is to break the 3 women, that is, to get them to enjoy the abuse, at which point they become your sex slaves and can be manipulated freely. The game is open-ended and features several ways in which the player can lose, including choosing the wrong sexual position with the youngest girl before breaking her, which will result in her stabbing the player to death while laughing hysterically. Needless to say, the game provoked a tidal wave of controversy, particularly in the UK and Australia, where it was made available on Amazon despite not receiving an official release in those territories, or anywhere else outside of Japan. Facing increasing pressure when third-party resellers began selling copies in the United States, game studio Illusion pulled Replay from distribution in 2009. Takashi's Challenge. Takashi Kitano, known in Japan as B. Katashi, was a game show host and personality who also appeared in the classic film Battle Royale. Takashi was the first Japanese celebrity to try his hand at producing his own video game, and Takashi's Challenge, produced for the Famicom, the Japanese branding of the Nintendo NES, technically qualifies as one. Alright, now depending on who you ask, it may also be the worst video game of all time, a brilliant work of satire, or one of the grandest acts of trolling ever performed. Takashi's Challenge is ostensibly a 2D side-scroller platformer in which a lowly working stiff must undergo all sorts of trial in order to find hidden treasure. While it sounds simple enough, this is a game that goes out of its way to frustrate and annoy its player at every conceivable turn. For starters, simple choices made early in the game, such as whether to divorce your wife or quit your job, will render later stages unpassable if the incorrect choice is made, forcing the player to start over. The key to completing your various tasks, the usual stuff like beating up mobsters, shooting UFOs, and getting blinding drunk, are game mechanics that are never explained, totally counterintuitive, and highly irritating. The player may be forced to sing karaoke using the second controller's microphone, or complete a hang gliding challenge without the ability to move up. One event requires the player to not touch the controls for a solid hour. The game managed to sell 800,000 copies, impressive for what amounts to an elaborate prank. For those dedicated or insane enough to reach the end, the reward is a black screen with the words "The End." But if the player left that message for 5 minutes, the text would change to a more appropriate message.